Today is Tuesday, May 20th, 2025. I am the interviewer, Amy Moritz, and I'm with Julie Fiegl Kwoka at the Lockport Public Library. Julie's scholastic softball career began as a seventh grader, the first year the school offered a junior varsity team. She played on the varsity then for 5 years and served as co-captain as a junior and senior. She went on to play college softball at SUNY Geneseo for 2 years, where she earned her bachelor's degree in elementary education in 1988, later earning a master's at Buffalo State. She taught for 33 years in the Lockport City School District, 32 of those as a fifth grade teacher, retiring in 2021. She coached Lockport softball for 27 years, retiring in 2015. Julie, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time today.
Absolutely.
So to start with, tell me about a time that you first remember falling in love with sports.
I feel like I've always been involved in sports. My parents said I always had a ball in my hand when I was little, but I can remember specifically hanging out and playing with my older brother in the neighborhood and all the other neighborhood boys, playing football and street hockey, or we made homemade rinks in different people's backyards and played hockey. We were always in the neighbor's yard playing wiffle ball, or what is considered a rundown. We called it hot box. We played that for hours on end. So I was always, a part of that. Gym classes, I liked the more competitive sports. We'd play hockey or we'd play kickball, not necessarily some of the other sports like, the parachute or climbing the ropes or things like that. I wanted the competitive things. I feel like, from the time I was just little, it was always a part of me.
So you had those experiences, just, backyard, neighborhood.
Oh, yeah.
Were there more formal opportunities for girls to play when you were growing up?
There was park softball, and it seemed like everybody in the city played park softball. I danced, for a little bit, but not too long. Mostly I played, I guess maybe sports that were more geared to boys. I remember participating in the punt, pass, and kick contest one year. I played Little League Baseball, and I was one of just a handful of girls who played on the major division, which was the older division. I was the only girl on my team. Again, I was on my brother's team. Interestingly enough, for Little League, the majors is the team that would, compete in the Williamsport tournament. I was not allowed to try out for the Williamsport team because I was a girl. But they did ask me to be on the team that scrimmaged against the team that was chosen to compete in that tournament. So my brother played Little Loop football. I know I wanted to play, and my mother said no. But park softball was really kind of it for summer ball. Everybody played, and we played in your neighborhood park. Maybe one of the best things that happened was that I was supposed to play at Grossi Park one year, and we didn't have enough people to field a team. So a group of us walked over to Willow Park, and there was a lot more girls there. There were different age levels, and that's where I continued playing for, until I stopped playing, park softball.
So playing Little League, with your brother, what was that experience like?
Well, it was great. I mean, my brother was never, we didn't play the same position, so there was never any competition, and he knew that I could hold my own, competing against the other boys. And it was fun. There were a handful of us. I think there were 4 girls maybe in that league altogether on different teams. I played first base, and he was a pitcher and did other things, and he was a little bit older than me, so he had moved on to the next level, while I was still playing. But yeah, there was never any, competition between us. He never, when he was always, encouraging of me to be there, and never, looked at it as though my little sister's hanging around. And even in the neighborhood, playing with all the neighborhood kids, he always wanted me to be a part of it, because he knew I could hold my own and keep up. And yeah, it was fun. Yeah.
Being the only girl on the team, did you, aside from the Williamsport not being able to try out, be on that team, were there any, do you remember anything major or any issues being one of the handful of girls in the Little League?
You know what? I don't. The coaches that we had at the time were wonderful. They didn't hesitate to, they didn't stick me out in the outfield somewhere where I couldn't do any damage, I guess. I was right in the thick of things, and I could hit and I could throw. And so, yeah, and some of the boys that played on the baseball team, I went all through school with them. So, there was never, none that was said to me to my face, but no, everybody was real accepting of me being on the team.
Do you think, I know you played softball, park softball. Do you think if you had the opportunity to continue just in baseball, I know we don't have, girls are starting to play more baseball now, but baseball and softball, similar but different, very different sports.
Correct.
Would you have rather have, or do you not even think about that because that wasn't an option?
Really? Different times you see girls competing in the Little League World Series, and that was okay. I was just as happy to go to softball. I knew that when I was old enough to try out for the high school team that I would, and I was fine with that. It didn't bother me to make the switch. I guess it was what it was expected. Once they had, an option for my age at the time, then yeah, I would play softball. So I was okay with that.
Mm-hmm. What was it about softball? Or was there a point where softball became the sport of choice for you?
I think probably right from, 7th grade on. I know that I started playing softball in 7th grade. I did start playing volleyball as an 8th grader, but I feel like we are more of a baseball family, a softball, baseball family, and it was easy to play pickup games in the neighborhood. So you kept playing it, but I just found that, I liked that. I enjoyed, the competition. As you get older, you play, beer league, softball. So it was just a game that could, transition from one age to the next. And, a lot of my friends were playing. So it was, the thing to do. And, then my sisters, as they, came on, they started playing. So, yeah, it just was, it just seemed to be the sport that I maybe had the most access to outside of school season. So, yeah, it just kind of developed from there.
You mentioned volleyball. Did you play other sports in high school too?
I played basketball for one season, and I played volleyball for, I think, 4 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
How did you like being that multi-sport athlete?
I loved it. I loved it. The rule in our house was, you had to get your jobs done at home, and you had to maintain your grades. And my mother used to always say, if you keep them tired and hungry, they're not going to be getting in trouble. And I'm one of 5 kids, so we all were involved in sports. But yeah, I loved it. I loved playing volleyball, and one season just led into the next. So we were always busy. But I did play volleyball a little bit, intramurals in college and things like that, but softball seems to be the one that got a hold of me, I guess.
Mm-hmm. What do you remember about that 1979, that your first season you're playing JV? It's the first year that there's a JV team, even really?
Yeah, there were a lot of girls trying out that were younger, and so we made up a JV team, and we played against other schools in the area that had JV. I don't know if they had them before us or if it all kind of happened at the same time. But yeah, there was a group of us, and we had, actually, I think he was a volunteer coach at the time, took us under his wing, and we played, a season. And I think we used, probably what uniforms they could, come up with. We shared uniforms back in the day, of course. So we played, and I don't even remember exactly how many games we played, but, a full season's worth. Yeah, so, there were probably maybe a couple other 7th graders on the team with me. But yeah, so, that was the start of it.
And then going up to varsity and then playing the rest of your time at the varsity level.
I moved up to varsity as an 8th grader. Unfortunately, I didn't finish the whole season. I had played the first 5 games of the season in 5 different positions, and in that 5th game, I slid into third base and kind of twisted my ankle. And the next day in gym class, I wanted to sit out of gym class because I had another game that night. My ankle was just a little tender, and I wasn't allowed to sit out of gym class. And I can remember we were playing stunt kickball, and I was running from 2nd to 3rd, and I just rolled my ankle, and I was on crutches after that, and that was the end of my 8th grade season. So
that's a tough way to end that.
That was very tough. Back then, if you got your varsity letter as an 8th grader or anything like that, that was really something special. And I think each team or each coach had their own requirements for what it would take to earn the varsity letter. And I did not meet that, even though I had participated in the first 5 games. I wasn't allowed to get my varsity letter till 9th grade. So that was kind of disappointing, something that's always stuck with me, but it is what it is. It's whatever rules that they had at the time. And so.
But then you did come back in 9th grade.
I did.
And then what were the rest of your, take a little bit through like what that experience was like on those teams.
It's funny, you think you'll remember those days forever, right? And then it all blurs together. But we had a new coach when I was a sophomore and a freshman and a sophomore. And I started pitching, and this coach really took a lot of time with me. Kind of unheard of back then, the off-season work, but he spent a lot of extra time with me, working on my pitching, helping me to pitch, which was great. And then my junior and senior year, we had a different coach, a great guy as well. I just remember, I remember playing at the high school, which that diamond doesn't even exist anymore. I remember, I don't remember traveling on the bus or things like that. I remember maybe snippets of different games and things. I remember, I don't know if it was our junior or senior year. It had rained, we were getting ready to start, and the fields, of course, were all dirt, and they were a mess. And so a group of us took it upon ourselves to drain the water off the field in the hopes that they'd be able to fix it, and it would allow us to play. And we spent, everybody went home and got hoses from their own house, and we got brooms and everything we could think of. And this was just players doing this. And somebody from the newspaper went by and came in and took a picture of us out there trying to work on our own diamond. And then it rained overnight, and that was the end of that. We never got it in. But I can remember that memory of us, getting together and doing that, just bound and determined to get out on the field, so early in the spring that's always swampy, muddy. So.
That's when you were playing during your days. Did you and your team, did you ever compare yourself to this is what the guys had? Was there any, because the baseball team had been around for a long time, well established, and was there any comparison with that?
I don't remember so much of that. Again, my brother, he played baseball, and I don't remember a lot of that. We both played at the high school. Their field was there, our field was there. My sisters remember, because it was a little different when they were playing, that by then there was construction going on, and so they moved to Outwater Park, both teams, and they said that if you had rain and they had to get the fields ready, if there was a choice made between which field are we going to work on, it seemed to be the boys' field before the girls' field. But I don't remember a lot of that. I'm sure probably it did happen, but I don't remember a lot of comparing what they had and what we had. We didn't, unlike some of the other sports. When I played volleyball, we had to wait for the soccer team to be done with their uniforms because we wore those uniforms. We always had our uniforms. Maybe the first year for JV, maybe they were, mix and match sort of uniforms. But after that, we had our own. So it must not have been relevant enough to jump out at me.
Right. Yeah. You did mention that to get your varsity letter as an 8th grader, but still is a big deal.
Sure.
I think for people. What was it like as a female student athlete? At Lockport, during that time.
What do you mean in terms of?
I guess just in terms of the culture, in terms of the support that you may have had, or the recognition that people may have had about. It could have been as a female athlete, or even just athletes in general at the school. I don't feel like there was anything that really stood out. I know that a couple times in high school, different teachers would come to watch us play. If we happened to be playing, I want to say in Lewiston, and one of our teachers lived in Lewiston, so she came over to watch the game. So everybody, people would say, "How'd you do last night?" And of course, there'd be announcements. There'd be newspaper articles, so people were keeping up with it, whereas you don't see maybe as many local, the day-to-day sports scores in the paper like it used to be. And I don't think, I think back then, everybody that got the newspaper, that everybody kind of knew what was happening. So, people would ask you, how it was going, how was your game last night? Always very supportive and encouraging, and taking pride in, Lockport pride, taking pride in our athletes, and people were supportive of that. Mm-hmm. When you graduate from Lockport,
mm-hmm.
and then you go to Geneseo
Yep.
for school. Tell me about your decision to go to Geneseo, and I know you played for 2 years there as well.
I did. Geneseo is just such I tell people it's a great place to spend 4 years. It was great. They had a good elementary education program, one of the best in the area, so that drew me to that. I made the decision to go there and knew I wanted to continue playing ball. I actually, I tried out for the volleyball team in the fall, and then decided, nope, you know what, I've got to focus on, my grades and do whatever. I can't do it. And so I kind of withdrew, pulled myself out before tryouts were finished. And then in the spring, I decided to try out for softball, which very similar to the process at Lockport High School. You just walked in the gym and, for 3 or 4 days, just kind of showed what skills you had. And so I did. I played for 2 seasons. After that, it's a D3 school, so it's a lot harder to miss classes and make up work and be excused for travel. Some of my courses didn't allow me to keep playing. So I ended up, not playing my junior and senior year, but I did play for 2 seasons.
What was that experience like, those first 2 seasons?
It was a lot of fun. Some of my teammates lived in the dorm right next door, so we would, walk back and forth together. And I pitched in high school, but I didn't really want to pitch in college, so I didn't really say that I was a pitcher. And one of our pitchers got hurt. And of course, everything is a doubleheader. So whatever school you went to play against, you knew you were going to play 2 games. So our coach was in a little bit of a panic because we were down a pitcher. And I just couldn't let her go through that. So I told her that I had pitched in high school. And so I kind of filled in the rest of freshman year. And then come sophomore year, then she wanted me to do a lot more of that. So it required, some extra work, some extra time. But, we would travel, by van or by bus, depending on where we were going. But it is even just a D3 school, it does take a lot of your time. So, when I see these girls playing college softball, which of course now this time of year we're glued to our TV for the Women's College World Series, but you can just imagine the pressure and the dedication and the time it takes to keep your grades up and maintain that high level of athleticism. I mean, it's just amazing. But it was a lot of fun. We had a good time playing and practicing, and it just felt like a natural extension, from high school. Not too much different, really.
For academics, you decide in your course load that you're not going to play your junior and senior year. Was that difficult after having played on a team for so long?
Yeah, it was difficult to make that decision, but the choice was almost out of my hands because we had practicum and the time that you had to go to neighboring schools, and Geneseo is not it's a little bit of a drive to other places, so to get back from that and try and make a bus was difficult. And you couldn't say, well, I'm not going to go to practicum this day. It just didn't work like that. So it was just a decision that had to be made, and I was okay with that. I definitely missed playing, but looking at the big picture, I knew that getting my degree and all that came with that was much more important. So it was not a great decision, but an easy decision in the long run.
Did you ever think about going into coaching?
You mean before I started?
Before you started, yeah.
I guess maybe when I started, when I was getting close to finishing graduation, getting ready to graduate, I thought that it would kind of be a neat thing to come back and coach at my high school or at a neighboring high school or something. So I did have, it went through my head. But yeah, I guess I probably did.
Uh-huh. When you graduate Geneseo, I believe you told me your first year at Lockport was a substitute year, right?
I substituted just after I graduated. I subbed for a whole year, only in Lockport, but I did everything from, kindergarten to high school and, phys ed, art, music, any classroom, anything at all. And I was hired to fill in. The coach of the softball team at that point was on sabbatical, and so she couldn't coach because she wasn't teaching in the district for that year. So I knew that when I was given the position that it was a 1-year only position, and I thought, well, get my foot in the door, it'll be fine. 1 year it'll be great, it'll be fun. My sisters were seniors. I coached them my first year. And then after that season, the teacher that had the team, she resigned it, decided not to come back to it. And so at that point, I had gotten hired full-time by the district. And so they gave me the position, and I kept it for 27 years.
Yeah, I was going to say, that was you came in and then you were there for...
I was there for a long
you wrote
time.
That for a long
I
time.
was there for a long time.
So first I want to ask about, what was it like coaching your sisters?
Oh, if you ask them and you ask me, you're probably going to get two different answers, right? I wasn't much older than them, 4 years older than them. So I was coaching my sisters and a lot of their friends who knew me, just through them. One of my sisters was a catcher. One of them pitched, but also played third base. And so it was interesting. There was a lot of lively dinner conversation after games. And our dad, of course, would be there watching, and then he'd, add his 2 cents as we were talking about it after. So it was a kind of an interesting year. I was just learning the ropes and getting to know about myself as a coach and where I was going with that. And they had been on the team for a few years because they were seniors, and they had started playing young. So, we had some lively discussions, and but it was fun. It was, looking back on it now, it's kind of neat to think that, the way my career developed, that I had them at the start of my career. I coached my oldest daughter, Jennifer, towards the end of my career. She graduated in 2011. And then I was very fortunate enough to coach my youngest daughter, Jordan. I retired when she graduated. So it was, kind of a neat full circle experience over the course of 27 years.
Oh my gosh, yeah, for sure, to have all of that. You mentioned something that I never thought of. Not only were you coaching your sisters, but you weren't that much older than any of the people that you were coaching when you started. Was that... What was that like? They
called me Julie because that's how they knew me. So then each subsequent year, as new players would come on, they would call me Julie because the other girls were calling me Julie. And to start with, that was okay. But then I eventually got to the point where I was teaching or coaching students that I had taught. And so then I had some of them calling me Mrs. Kwoka, some of them calling me Julie. And my one athletic director, Mr. Berg, he said, and I agree. I mean, you look at it now, when you're going from year to year, you're not paying attention to it. But he said, absolutely not. They should be calling you either Coach or Mrs. Kwoka. And I said, yeah, you're right, for sure. But, to start with, they were just girls a few years older than me that knew me out of school. So, but they, in terms of, respect or anything like that, that was never an issue. And I could still demonstrate and do things in the gym. I still had my skills and ability, and so, and most of them knew that I was a former athlete, so that was never an issue. And I like to joke as I was coaching later on that when it would come time to work on slap bunts or anything like that, because I'm a lefty hitter, that I would still be the hitter from the left side, and the kids would get a big kick out of, you still got it, coach. But yeah.
And how did your coaching evolve over your years? Like when you start, I guess, you thought about maybe coaching, and now, okay, here's a team, and you've played on teams, but...
Yeah, the first year was, as I said, interesting, but a lot of fun. And when I was given the opportunity to stay on, I jumped at it, of course. And every year it just seemed more, I was more into it. I was more invested. I coached some of the greatest kids to come through that high school. And so every year, you had kids that you just really wanted to do your best for and help make them into, better ball players, better people. And so it didn't take long before we were starting to see some improvements and some changes and some better competition, and our ball players being more respected around the league, and our team being known as, watch out for Lockport, and every year we seem to be, making strides in that direction. And so it was as a teacher, first and foremost, that was most important to me was these girls developing into their best selves, and whatever I could do to help them as a coach and as a mentor. And so then it became, really became my passion. And, I, as I said, I have two daughters, and I coached many, many athletes before I had my girls. And, so that took a lot of sacrifice from my husband, and a lot of help from my family, my parents and my in-laws, and, helping support what I loved doing. They all kind of pitched in the spring. And then, as my girls got older, some of my athletes babysat them, and, I've maintained a nice close relationship with many of them. And I think that's the thing, it's about the relationships, and that's what team sports is all about, is the memories you make and the connections you make. And so every year it just became more and more part of who I was.
Mm-hmm. Were there things that you noticed when you became a coach, or any time during your coaching, that because you were a player mm-hmm. at that Lockport, and now on the other side of the ledger, and now you're dealing with things that you didn't deal with as a player. You just, you didn't deal with scheduling or transportation or, right. Except for that one time, the field maintenance, right? So were there things that surprised you, or things that were different than that you saw when you were on the other side as being a coach?
The support that I had from my athletic directors, second to none. First, my athletic director, Bob Ames, one of the greatest guys I've ever known, and Pat Burke, he's second to none. He just was organized and ran things smoothly, and we had what we needed. So those little things like field conditions, or we just focused on coaching because he took care of everything else. He worked a lot of hours, he worked long hours, and he was just the best in the business. And so it really made my job easier. If I went to him and said, I'd like to get this, or I need this, or whatever, maybe I didn't have it that year, but probably I had it the next year. And that was so important, because he just he did everything he could for our girls to be successful, and for me to have what I needed to help them be successful.
Which sounds like a great experience to have that support. Like
Mm-hmm.
Not everyone had that.
Correct.
Would have that support.
Correct.
From their athletic directors. So that kind of leads into kind of a question. When you think about Title IX, what does that phrase mean to you, or what does that mean to you?
Well, I don't know any different, and my team didn't know any different, because we weren't treated any different. as I mentioned before, my sisters and I were talking about me coming here to this interview today, and about I said, did we get the bad gym times? And they're like, yeah, all the time. Girls had the bad gym times. The way Mr. Burke handled things, varsity coaches, you guys just, you make out the schedule, and, and obviously encourage us to be fair with times and things. But there was never, the boys have it and we don't. And I think, young ladies playing today, they don't know any different. It's just always been there. And it's great because it allows these athletes to participate and just enjoy their time and just enjoy the experience, and not have any of that surrounding it. It's nothing that I had to really worry about, when I'm glad. I think about the people who played before me, and maybe the conditions they played under or what they went through. Fortunately, that wasn't a big issue, and it certainly isn't for the ladies today, which is good.
Right. How did you see softball or opportunities or things at the game or outside the game, evolve from the time you're coaching your sisters to the time when you're coaching your daughters?
Well, hardly anybody played travel ball. And there was a rule at one point where, you couldn't coach outside your season. So if there was somebody maybe involved with your program who ran an open gym or would work in the batting cages with somebody, that was fine. But you couldn't yourself really get your whole group, your team together and practice outside of your season. Nobody traveled south, when I was in high school or when I first started coaching. That started to become a thing. But yeah, those type of things are different now. My daughters, they played travel ball, and they had open gym, and they had, when you walk into Dick's Sporting Goods, you're going to find all kinds of equipment for girls, right down to the helmets that have the hole in the back for the ponytails and things like that. But those things didn't exist, so many years ago. So the opportunities are better, and there's so many travel teams and different, ability levels, and just a lot more of that didn't exist back in the day.
Earlier you mentioned the Women's College World Series, which is going on right now. Are you surprised at all as to how popular that event has become even casual sports fans, are
everybody watches it. It's exciting. It's fast paced. You see these women that are just phenomenal athletes, and I don't mind watching a baseball game or going to a professional baseball game, but they take so long. Everything is drawn out, and I like watching. We're glued to the TV right now, especially my older daughter. But I like the cheering they do. I like the different rally caps they do. I think all those things are the quirky little things each team does. I love all that. The excitement. It's just fun to watch, and it's fast paced and it's exciting, and you see them just playing their hearts out, and I think that draws people in. I think people enjoy the level of athleticism that these girls have, and you could be flipping the channels and find yourself an hour later, still sitting there watching the game because it is so exciting.
Obviously now the quirky, the cheers and the chants and that is amazing. Is that How deep does that go in softball culture? Is that something that, like, maybe not to that extent, is that something that, do you remember doing that, or is that a later development?
I don't know that I remember doing it, but certainly the teams that I coached, we had, and again, that's the thing that I loved about coaching is the excitement and the energy that the girls had for the game. They had cheers, they had chants, they had little rituals that they did. I can think of a few of them, and they make me laugh. Maybe one of the best ones we had in 2012, we won our first and only at Lockport High School softball league championship, and we shared it with Niagara Falls, and it was just an amazing year. But there was a big dirt pile out in right field, and that's what they used when they had to work on our field. And one of the parents filled a bucket of the dirt, and I didn't know this until much later, but kept it in their car. And whenever we went to a visiting school, whoever were the captains that day, they would get some of the dirt out of the car, and when we would go for ground rules, they would put it on the opposing diamond because we were bringing our mojo with us. And the parents were all into it. Well, we had a reschedule, and so we were going to be playing a team at home, a doubleheader, but the first game we were going to be the visitor. And when we went out for ground rules, the captains came out and they dumped some of the dirt right on our own field. And the umpire looked at him and he said, "What are you doing?" And they said, whenever we're the visitor, we bring our mojo with us and we're the visitor this game. And he's like, "I love that." So just little things like that you remember. It's part of the excitement. And just so much fun.
Building off of that, what's a favorite memory or two that you have?
Wow.
I never say the favorite memory.
Because
that can change from hour to hour.
Right.
For me, quite frankly.
As I said earlier, I've coached some of the greatest kids, just not just athletically, but personalities and who they were. Just some great kids. My husband coached with me after our girls got older, and they both played. They made their way up from JV and varsity, and my husband coached modified at one point. Having, all of us involved with it, I think is something that really stands out. My cousin helped me coach towards the end. I've coached, a couple of different cousins. I've had former athletes come back and help me coach, which means so much to me because they thought enough of the program to want to come back and be a part of it on that level. Definitely, I think winning our championship in 2012 is something I'll never forget. Having, my sisters on the team, coaching both of my daughters, those are just, it really did span through my whole family. Just everybody was involved and everybody was invested. But probably the two things would be, having my girls on my team and our championship in 2012, because it's something that hasn't been repeated since then. And I hope someday that there's another date up on that banner in the high school. But yeah, it was I don't know that I was quite ready to retire when I did, but it was time. And my youngest daughter was graduating, and we thought that possibly she was going to continue on playing. And I said, I'm not going to miss a minute of what she's doing. And there were a couple other factors that I just felt it was time. So when she was a junior, I said to her, what do you think if I graduate with you next year? And she said, really? And I said, yeah. I said, if I'm going out, I'm going to go when you go. And so we went out together.
That's so great.
Yeah.
That's and that's part of what the beauty of sport is, that family.
Yep.
Chosen and blood.
Absolutely. I wouldn't trade a minute of any of the 27 years that I coached, good and bad. There's always, things you would like to forget or whatever, but just the people I met, the other coaches that I got to know, the umpires, even different sports reporters over the years, just so many positive experiences that came from it. I wouldn't change a day of it, not a day of it.
And last question for you is, what would you want younger generations to know about the history of girls, women, and sport, particularly in Lockport?
To just keep the momentum going, and be a respected athlete. Take pride in they always say the number on the front is more, or the name on the front is more important than the name on the back. And that's really, just be a stand-up person. Be respectful of your teammates, of other teams, of umpires. You see a lot of maybe not so appropriate behavior on some fields and in other arenas of sports. And it, enjoy the time, but take pride in it, and be a good teammate. I guess that's isn't that the message we're trying to send them out into the world? Just be a good teammate. Somebody others can rely on, somebody that others respect.
That's great. Julie, thank you so much for your time and sharing your stories.
It's been a pleasure.
All right.